So good afternoon. As Andrew says, I'm Tom Allen. I'm founder of Metable. Now, with all these amazing things going on today and all these ways of creating music that I couldn't even imagine, I thought I'd actually speak to you a little bit about the music industry and its relationship with metadata, talk about my time in the music industry and the issues we're trying to solve with Metable. To give you a little bit more insight about how the industry deals with data, and then I want to speak about the project we're doing with the British Library and how we're helping them in their cataloguing through technology and using some of the APIs that are out there. So I came into the industry around 8 years ago, starting as an intern and then becoming digital manager of an indie label. And this basically consisted of filling in a lot of spreadsheets, filling in iTunes Producer. And iTunes would only ever promo your stuff if you'd sent it through to Grace Note. So you'd always end up filling it in iTunes, submitting to CDDB, as it was then. And that was pretty much what metadata was to us. It was a means of getting your releases to market. It was a necessity at the end of the day. You took the label copy from the Word document that somebody had filled out, and you converted it over to a spreadsheet. And then around 2009, I moved to a large physical distributor to start their digital department. And leading up to this time, the digital industry had changed a hell of a lot. And it had moved on hugely from just the simple download stores that we knew in 2005. And metadata became not just about digital, not just about getting your shit onto iTunes, but about access to music and experiences. We saw a rise of services that weren't just trying to sell you something, but instead provide a digital experience around music, such as Shazam or Last.fm. Importantly, music services open their APIs and allow people to build on them, which led us to the first Spotify apps and apps concentrating on experience and curation. So that data was no longer just about the supply chain. It was more about context. And this is the data that the music industry is not particularly stored or thought about. And it's, not to run the industry down. I was part of that too. Let's face it, for 4 or 5 years, I never even considered that either. But suddenly, things were changing around us. We had no way of really dealing with them. And so running parallel to this, data was also becoming hugely important to ensure that you were actually claiming the rights that you were owed. And this runs through every right for every musician, composer, label, or publisher. And so as the music industry was decreasing in revenues and was quickly heading towards a penny industry, it became increasingly important to make sure that you were claiming every penny that was owed to you. So PPL, who administer the public performance in the UK, and they should have every release registered with them, in 2009 they changed their requirements, so they now required much richer data, which left huge swathes of catalogue incomplete, leaving labels to update much of this by hand, and for most left many years incomplete and weren't getting paid for. And it was my time at this physical distributor, seeing the great leaps forward from the music services and tech companies, and yet all these labels we were working with were still filling in those same spreadsheets from the label copy like it was 2005. We were looking at all these apps and services launching, and yet 90% of the industry haven't actually heard of MusicBrainz, let alone how much data they genuinely supply to all the music apps out there. When people like yourselves who are building the new music industry need good, accurate data, it should be easy, it should be painless. Yet anything beyond a minimal title, artist, and genre selected from a possible 12 is pretty hard to get. And we looked at the PPL issue and many other similar issues on data and said there's got to be a better way for us to deal with this. And every rights holder, however big or small, will need to take close control of their data and not just leave it for somebody else, but to ensure they get paid for all their rights. So we created Metable. It's a simple catalogue and rights management platform for a rights holder. We concentrate on making it easy for them to get their data in, get their data out. And we build those integrations. So we've concentrated on integrations with PPL, PRS, Sound Exchange, Harry Fox, the different distribution models that artists and labels use, and the third-party services that require this metadata. And I hugely believe that by doing this, we can benefit everyone in the industry by getting the rights holders to deal with this data almost by proxy, by joining all those dots with contributors and recording info for PPL, composers and publishers for registrations with PRS and MCPS, and richer genre and contextual info, we can start to modernize, preparing everyone for this new music industry. And right now, we're actually beginning to work with Music Brains on providing a conduit with them for the music industry to supply data to them. So far, there's only 2 labels that actually supply any data to them at all. So when people like yourselves are using these services, you're getting the best data possible. So as Andrew mentioned, we've been working closely with the British Library over this last year in providing the infrastructure to modernize the way they're receiving music from the industry. Previously, they've always catalogued physical releases. Around 60 to 70% of everything released in the UK they've actually catalogued. But as things have moved into the digital domain, they've needed to change in order to keep up with this. So we were tasked with building them infrastructure to receive deliveries from the digital supply chain, so from the labels, to ingest this metadata into the system, allowing them to edit. And then we've looked at integrating with the data from other sources, from different APIs that are out there. So we receive data in DDEX format from the industry. Now, the British Library are only interested in the facts. So they're especially interested in recording dates, release dates, original release dates, who played what on the record, who composed the song, and linking those songs to other recordings of that same song. And once you get into classical, there's a whole other world of metadata that I'm sure there's plenty of people in this room who know far more about than me. But as I mentioned before, the industry doesn't supply a great deal of this richer information. And the quality of this data changes greatly from label to label. So we needed other sources of data that could supplement this supply chain data. So we've used Decibel, Discogs, and Music Brains currently. And we're looking to include further APIs, looking at some retail APIs and some other ones that are out there. And for using these different APIs, that gave us a great insight as to what they're providing, how we could use them for the British Library situation, but also consider how others may use them. So we'll take a quick look at a few of the different APIs that are out there. No doubt a lot of you know a lot of these, but perhaps not all. And they fall really into 3 main categories. Curated, which employees actually spend time ensuring the data is correct or writing descriptions and reviews. Community, where they're maintained by communities, much like Wikipedia, who will correct the incorrect data. And recommendation, which are more about building knowledge on previous uses and curating radio style experiences. And I think, what you need to consider when looking at which APIs to use is actually what you require from them. If coverage is your thing, if you need to actually supply something back to a user, then likelihood is one of the community APIs. Lots of people use Discogs for their coverage. They do have masses of coverage, but the data perhaps is sometimes not particularly accurate or rich. Whereas I think Music Brains is a great API for looking at breadth of data and with some good detail. If accuracy is required, so if you're looking at good data rather than just returning something to the user, then curated is probably the way to go. I mean, Decibel pride themselves on accuracy of depth of data. I think a lot of you may not have heard of OpenAura. OpenAura was actually started by Kevin Arnold, who launched IODA late 90s, early 2000s, one of the early digital aggregators. And OpenAura are trying to curate all of this, matching data from Music Brains, Discogs, and other sources, pulling together all the social footprint of an artist, and providing official images from the rights holders themselves, and they share their revenues with the rights holders as well. They certainly want to take a look at and see what they're doing. And so if you're looking to curate a listening experience, then obviously one of the recommendation APIs are the way to go. So coming back to the British Library, accuracy of facts was the most important thing for us. So we've used Decibel since it was one of the best curated APIs based on facts. But we also backed this up with data from Music Brains and Discogs to give us a breadth of data and to give us enough coverage across all music, since the curators were And since the curators were managing the data going into the system, they could actually pick and choose which data they wanted to receive from those APIs. And the biggest challenge we actually had with the British Library project and using these APIs is actually ensuring that we're returning the best results from each of them. In terms of search and in terms of finding data from them, they're all quite different. On any given release, there's often lots of reissues, different formats. And so we had to create algorithms in order to look for those best matches. We obviously had unique identifiers as catalog numbers and barcodes coming through the supply chain, so we tried to use those where possible. But often, Music Brains or Discogs or Decibel didn't actually have this information, so we had to then find ways of actually searching by artist, title, release dates, formats, anything we could to just really narrow that down. So that's basically me. My details are there somewhere. We're around the rest of the day, so come and say hi. And thank you to Andrew for inviting us.
More than welcome. Tom, thank you so much. Tom Allen from Metable.